To another edition of the Magic Latest podcast where we discuss everything Orlando Magic basketball. I'm your host, Jalon Dixon, and today we've got a bunch of stuff to get into. But before we get started, remember to like, comment, and subscribe for daily Orlando Magic content. We are on the road to 1,000 subscribers and trying to become the biggest Orlando Magic podcast here on the YouTube platform. With all that being said, remember to hit that post notification bell so you always know when we're dropping new videos. And let's go ahead and get right into it. Got a couple things on the docket today. Obviously, the Orlando Magic play the Atlanta Hawks very, very soon, so we're going to dive into that at the end of the podcast. But a couple of little nuggets of info that I found floating around the internet. And we're going to start with an interesting rankings that I saw by ESPN that ranked it's like basically a long-term ranking of the ringless NBA teams by chances to win their first title. And it's basically a compilation of the 10 teams in the NBA that as a franchise have not won an NBA championship since the very beginning, and ranking them 1 through 10 based off of their chances to most likely win a championship between now and 2031. I'm going to give a little bit more context because I'm not doing it as much justice. This is actually a really, really interesting article. The beginning section is a portion that says NBA titles are never easy to win, but the path to one seems more attainable now than it was for decades. To find out which of those 10 teams is most likely to break through, we built a model that projects every franchise's title chances over the next 6 seasons. The framework starts with each team's preseason odds since 1985, including for this season using ESPN Bet, then layers in two key ingredients: the weighted average age of each roster based on recent regular season wins above replacement, and the age and performance of each team's best player, again based on WAR. Using those factors, we can estimate a probability of winning the title for each team in each of the next 6 seasons, then simulate that stretch thousands of times to see how often a new name joins the list of the champions and who is most likely to be next in line. Across 2,500 simulations, there's roughly a 75% chance that at least one of those 10 ringless teams finally captures a title by 2031, which makes sense historically as most distinct 5-year blocks in league history have produced at least one first time winner. So which team will it be? Let's see who the model says is due to make some history for this city, for its city and fans. And at number one, the team with the best chance out of those 10 squads to win their first NBA championship is the Orlando Magic with 24%. Let's read quickly their little blurb for their section. The Magic seemingly have been on every short list of next contenders in recent years as they snagged Franz Wagner and Paulo Banchero in consecutive drafts and began to forge a cohesive path toward contention under coach Jamal Mosley. Now, after a couple of first-round playoff exits with their full ascent put a bit on hold last season because of injuries to Wagner and Banchero, the Magic seem as ready as they will ever be to take the next step. Though they lost a fair amount of talent over the offseason, Desmond Bane and Tyus Jones joined Wagner and Banchero as part of the league's youngest roster by weighted WAR in recent seasons. ESPN Bet gives the Magic the ninth highest title odds at 1,800, their highest since opening the 2010-2011 campaign at plus 1,000. The model also accounts for the overall youth plus the dynamic pair of Wagner and Banchero when looking ahead to what could be a bright future. Now, mind you, this is number one amongst a 10-team group that has the Indiana Pacers, who were just in the NBA Finals last season, the Minnesota Timberwolves, who have Anthony Edwards ascending in a positive direction and slowly but surely asserting himself as an MVP candidate, and even a team like the LA Clippers that pretty much this year has every quote-unquote win now caliber former all-star you could think of on the roster with James Harden, Kawhi Leonard, Chris Paul, Bradley Beal, Brook Lopez. Like, they have a win now roster as far as the guys they've assimilated together to be able to try to go make a run. And the Orlando Magic are the team that came up as a squad with the highest likelihood to win their organization's first championship. I think that's a sign that this team is moving in the right direction, obviously, not just from a drafting perspective, but also from a development perspective, especially from when it comes to doing things like making moves on the margins that make this team truly better. I think the Desmond Bain trade, the pickup of Tyus Jones, they're all moves that are understanding of what it is that what this team needs in order to be the best version of itself. And I think this is a really interesting article. I think you guys should definitely take a look at it. I read through a little bit further for some of the other teams that came up. Unironically, um, some of the teams that you would think had a much better chance than the Orlando Magic, or some of the teams that you think would have gotten a much better shot, are below by a decent margin. Like, again, the Indiana Pacers are at 4, Clippers at 3, Minnesota at 2. Like, those are 3 of the main teams that, if you let the national media speak, you would think if any team were most likely to win their first organizational championship within the next 5 years, one of those teams would come up first, just strictly based off of either how their roster is built currently or what they've done most recently that indicates that they're of that caliber. So the fact that the Orlando Magic are at the tippity top of that list, it means that, one, this offseason was very moving when it comes to people's viewership of how they see the Orlando Magic as a real championship contender. And number two, the belief in Paulo Banchero and Franz Wagner is definitely there. Next up, let's talk about Desmond Bain. Obviously, we talked about him a ton in yesterday's episode about how effective he was as the new member of that trio next to Paulo Banchero and Franz Wagner. And some of the comments after the game kind of doubled down on some of the chemistry chemistry praise that you could kind of see coming from this group, right? So Paulo Banchero after the game spoke glowingly of Desmond Bain in terms of what it was like operating with him in the pick and roll, saying, "I actually told him during the game we have to do more of that because it causes such a problem." Goes on further to say, obviously, he draws a lot of attention with the ball in his hand and coming off screens. So for me, being able to use that, being a screener can get easy looks. Anytime your star player is cool with being an effective screen setter, you know that you're doing something good for your ball club. Like, when your star player says, "I want to operate more as the screener in a pick and roll operation," because from an IQ perspective, he sees it as something that creates this mismatch and effective action offensively that they can just spam time after time after time because he just knows it works. Yes, you have to set a hard screen. Yes, you have to make physical contact on your screen. Something that a lot of bigs in today's NBA tend to struggle with is setting screens, but it's considered a ghost screen nowadays because it's more about the illusion of putting your body in the way as opposed to actually impeding the defender's progress in terms of trying to get over or under the screen. And a lot of times with Desmond Bain, it's guys trying to get over the screen because if you go under, he might shoot right through your eye and knock down a couple of 3-pointers along the way, right? So the fact that he already identifies this pick and roll combination so closely, I think it's important because for Paulo, it's going to open a lot up for him offensively to be more aggressive as a role man. And something that I've kind of said a lot, but I think is just really important to continue to reiterate. And I think I also brought it up in that episode where I spoke on what Carmelo Anthony said about mentality. The IQ for Paulo Banchero is there. The basketball IQ is there. Need him to be more aggressive in terms of seeking out his shots, mainly around the basket. There was a sequence offensively in the game the other day against the Miami Heat where he caught a one-on-one opportunity on the low block against Davion Mitchell. Don't get me wrong, Davion Mitchell is a very strong defender despite his size at the guard position. But in that possession, Paulo Banchero settled for a fadeaway jumper. Paulo Banchero had a 4 to 5 inch, if not more, height advantage on Davion Mitchell. But he also had the physical strength advantage. And instead of burrowing his way to the basket and getting fouled, and again, Paolo got to the foul line 12 times. I'm not saying that he necessarily did anything wrong per se, but again, it's that mentality change of like, you are so dangerous as a physical specimen with the God-given size that you have at 6'10", 240 something pounds or whatever it is. Use it to your advantage. And another way to lean into it is by being an effective screen and roller, because he has the kind of touch around the basket as a shooter, as a float with the floater, that if he can operate in this two-man pick and roll game with Desmond Bane, where you have to respect Desmond Bane as a shooter and that tag doesn't come, if Desmond makes that proper pass, you as a downhill player with the ball in your hand, either off the pass, one dribble and make a play, or off the pass and the first thing you do is go up, you're one of the most dangerous finishers around the basket in the league, because you draw so much contact, or players are literally moving out of your way because the physicality that you impose on that side of the ball makes it where dudes just do not want to be in the way of Paulo Banchero. So Desmond Bane creates an offensive mismatch on a night-to-night basis because of the fact that, unlike times in the past, you have to genuinely respect him as a shooter, which now puts you in a pick your poison scenario of, if Desmond pops out with the ball still in his hands in that pick and roll operation, he can off the dribble shoot, he can make a pass decision to Paulo Banchero off that tag, or he can swing it and keep the offense moving. Same thing could be said for Paulo Banchero in that situation, where off the tag, he can do so many things. He can roll, he can pop back, he can re-screen and create another opportunity for Desmond to find another shot. That screen and roll opportunity for him, I'm glad that Paulo wants to spam it, because there's so many different things that could come out of it, and you want to get as much experience with that as humanly possible, because that's, in the playoffs, that's the only way that you get to create real space on a consistent basis in half court. And that's what the playoffs end up coming down to. Don't get me wrong, the Indiana Pacers did it in a very special way last season, being able to make a run, and well, the last two seasons, being able to make a run by leaning on the fact that they play so fast with Tyrese Halliburton at point guard. But a lot of times in the postseason, it comes down to your ability to execute in the half court setting. And a lot of that has to do with being able to find and create shot creation space off of things like pick and roll opportunities, pick and pop opportunities, backdoor DHOs. It's a bunch of stuff that's all built in to one thing: shot creation space, creating open looks for yourself, creating efficient offense, aka the biggest question mark around the Orlando Magic. This is one of those things that can help them absolve that issue a good amount. And I wouldn't be surprised if this game against the Atlanta Hawks, there's a ton of this duo kind of operating in this pick and roll option, because I mean, the Atlanta Hawks showed in game one that they still have a real question in terms of rim protection, and that spells really good things for Paulo Banchero as the roll man, because Kristaps Porzingis doesn't have the physical stature to be able to hang with Paulo Banchero on the low block off the roll. And honestly, I don't think Onyeka Okongwu is too dangerous around the rim either, which means there's going to be a lot of times where Paulo can get that ball off the roll, make one dribble move, and make a decision around the basket. And he's either going to finish a lot of the times, or he's going to draw the foul. And that's going to make the game a lot easier. Next up, let's talk about the craziest trade I think I've ever seen on the internet. And I know that might seem like really hyperbolic, but Fadeaway World put together a trade that I just had to share after I saw the title of the article. The title of the article is 3-team trade idea for the Knicks to land Joel Embiid and Franz Wagner if they fail to acquire Giannis Antetokounmpo. Yeah, you're just as confused as I am. Let me actually read out the package here, because that's what makes it even crazier. The New York Knicks get Joel Embiid and Franz Wagner. The Philadelphia 76ers get OG Anunoby, Josh Hart, a 2026 second rounder from Orlando via Detroit or Milwaukee, a 2028 second round pick from New York via Indiana or Phoenix, and a 2020-30 second round pick from Orlando via Milwaukee. So basically, OG Anunoby, Josh Hart, and 3 second round picks. And the Orlando Magic get Karl Anthony Towns and Bacome Dadier. There's a million things wrong with what's going on here. Um, the main thing that's funny to me about this whole article is it's so Knicks friendly that when you scroll through it, it doesn't even have a legitimate reason to explain why the Orlando Magic would do this. It's just simply the fact that the Philadelphia 76ers start their rebuild having OG Anunoby and Josh Hart as two blue chip players next to Paul George and next to VJ Edgecombe, Tyrese Maxey, and Jared McCain. Cool. Totally understandable. The Knicks get to stay as real contenders by adding Joel Embiid and Franz Wagner to their roster. I guess on this roster with how much talent they have, Joel Embiid doesn't have to be like this insane, you know, long-term option, and he can be somebody that in, 25 to 28 minutes a game could just be the dominant center that he once upon a time was. And then you scroll further down and it's like, but why did the Orlando Magic do it? The Orlando Magic get Karl Anthony Towns out of it, and that does what? Is it addressing the redundancy of Franz Wagner and Paulo Banchero? Because like we don't know if that's a true issue just yet. It doesn't address the fact that the Orlando Magic need a secondary ball handler, and yes, I guess you could say by proxy Desmond Bane would be that, but now you just put yourself in a position where now the best defender on the perimeter has to focus primarily on Desmond Bane, and then you have the same issue you ran into before, which was like, who is the next best perimeter shot creator in the lineup? And the next name probably ends up becoming Jalen Suggs, which is not really high up on the list if we're talking about creating offense. And you run into this issue where like, okay, so Orlando's supposed to run it through a double big lineup that has Paulo Banchero at the 4 and Karl Anthony Towns at the 5? Or is it Paulo Banchero now plays the 3, Karl Anthony Towns is the 4, and Wendell Carter Jr. is the 5? Like, that's not the name that you should be moving Franz Wagner for. And by the way, you're moving Franz Wagner and Jonathan Isaac essentially to get Karl Anthony Towns, because we don't know what Bacome Dadier is just yet. Knicks fans swear by him and think that he's going to be like a real dude, and maybe he will be. But like, we don't know. So this is essentially trading Franz Wagner and Jonathan Isaac for Karl Anthony Towns in a situation where, like, do we even know how that fits next to Paulo Banchero? Sure, he's a floor spacer. That's great. No hate against that. So is Nikola Vucevic. He doesn't require having to trade Franz Wagner to get him. So the idea of moving this much to go get Karl Anthony Towns. Again, like I said, if you check out the article, there's literally no section in the article that explains why the Orlando Magic would want to get it. Like, it says the Magic acquire superstar big, sure. There is a little blurb that says they get Karl Anthony Towns. But it's like, but why? Why would they want him, though? Because the very first portion of the blurb says the Orlando Magic will be heading into the 2025-26 season as one of the top teams in the Eastern Conference, led by a young duo, young talented duo. The Magic are capable of emerging as surprise contenders. In this trade scenario, however, the Magic will witness some adjustments, specifically coming to the core rotation, with Wagner traded for a floor spacing big man like Karl Anthony Towns. The Magic's new star duo could be one of the deadliest tandems in the NBA. They already have one of the deadliest tandems in the NBA, so why do you need to switch it for a guy who the only thing that he adds is 3-point shooting. With Towns' efficiency from outside and Banchero's overall development as a multi-level scorer, the Magic could boast an elite offensive unit when additionally factoring in Towns' veteran experience. Again, why can't they do that with Franz Wagner, who's already been developing in the right direction, and Desmond Bane, who you just acquired to help add offensive efficiency? There's no real reason for the Orlando Magic to need to do this by any means. This is simply rumors say the New York Knicks want to move off of Karl Anthony Towns in some way, shape, or form. And the first name that came up was Giannis Antetokounmpo, given that that's where he wanted to go. That's what the reports say, is that that's the place he most likely would like to be if he were to leave from Milwaukee. But if this didn't work out, what would be the next thing? Okay, you're just bolstering the Knicks roster for the sake of making up for the fact that they wouldn't land Giannis, and you give them a budding superstar in Franz Wagner who's developed and gotten better every single year since being drafted. And sure, you get off of the Jonathan Isaac contract, but you get Karl Anthony Towns, who's still signed through another 2 to 3 years himself, and Pacome Dadier, who doesn't have any real resume to himself just yet. So that's a long-winded way of saying, yo, fade away world, bro. Yo, all the closet Knick fans out there, just come out and raise your hands, because that was one of the craziest trades I've ever seen. It's very lopsided. And Joel Embiid to the Knicks, like, I don't even know if the Knicks want Joel Embiid right now. I mean, but don't get me wrong, their center rotation is still a little interesting with the fact that Mitchell Robinson is, still not necessarily the healthiest. Didn't even start game one. But they got Gershon Yabusele this offseason. They got Huck Porty with the last pick in the draft, and he looked pretty good in game one as well. Like, why would they want Joel Embiid, who only played 20 minutes and looked like a complete shell of himself after the first game of the season? So, the whole trade is just nasty work. You guys let me know in the comment section down below how you guys feel about the trade. I think that trade is nasty work, in my personal opinion. But, I mean, maybe y'all like it. A lot of y'all don't like whenever there's trade scenarios that throw in Franz. So, I think a lot of y'all going to hate it, though. But let me know in the comment section down below. Last but not least, little mini preview of Magic versus Hawks. And this one's kind of quick. I'm not going to lie. We're not going to be doing crazy deep dive analysis for games that are going to come and go, right? But there's just a couple of things that I think are really interesting. Number one, the Atlanta Hawks are coming off of a game where they lit up the most scored points of any team on the second day of the NBA season. Like, of any game on that crazy 12-game slate, the Toronto Raptors were the team that scored the most points of the night with almost 140 points. And that came off of the fact that they were able to force 16 turnovers and score 22 points off of them, something that I think the Orlando Magic are very capable of doing. They were guarding 94 feet, felt like they were guarding them 96 feet, guarding them all the way through to the out of bounds lines. And the on-ball pressure was insane across the board for the Toronto Raptors. And the key stat for that game that the Orlando Magic should lean on when talking about what they should do against the Atlanta Hawks is the Toronto Raptors won the points in the paint battle 84-54. This was a straight physicality, straight bruiser work, straight let's get to the basket and put as much pressure on the rim as possible, because we don't think that between Onyeka Okongwu, Jalen Johnson, and Kristaps Porzingis that they got themselves a real rim defender we need to worry about. And the proof was in the pudding. Again, they won the points in the paint battle by 30. They were on the boards, crashing the offensive glass. You could tell that was something that was preached going into the game, of hitting the offensive glass at a high rate, put back dunks, driving, being mad lethal around the basket as re-screen after re-screen, ball move after ball move. They were swinging the ball. It felt like the ball was just constantly moving around, creating space, and it was creating driving lanes for guys to just attack the paint, possession after possession after possession. And the Atlanta Hawks in the middle, they were soft, and it made it really easy for this team. Mind you, again, the Toronto Raptors, very similarly to the Orlando Magic, are not going to be known as like this knockdown three-point shooting team. Emmanuel Quickley, their best three-point shooter outside of Grady Dick, missed all 7 of his 3-point attempts in this game. Yet they still put up 138 points. This is a team that could have finished the night with like 150, 160 if Emmanuel quickly was a little bit more on as a 3-point shooter the other night. So this is not about being a crazy 3-point shooting team against the Atlanta Hawks. This is about controlling the pace of the game. I think Trae Young, he had himself a decent game. Trae Young had 22 points and had a handful of assists as well. But keeping Trae Young at bay and absolutely pounding the paint and being physical. And I think defensively, throwing multiple bodies at Trae Young, but mainly if you can put guys like Anthony Black and Jalen Suggs, just sit them on Trae Young defensively on the perimeter and just have them lock him up. Like, that's just going to make it so much more difficult for the rest of the team, because even with the fact that Jalen Johnson has like ascended as an on-ball player at the power forward position, they're still kind of looking for that next shot creator on the perimeter to be next to Trae Young that can like consistently find his way into efficient offense. And so shutting the water off on Trae Young makes it where guys are gonna they can play balance. Don't get me wrong. Like, if I'm not mistaken, they had, I think it was 5 or 6 guys scoring double figures in this game. Like, they have guys who can be offensive weapons. But when you're talking about needing to go get a bucket, Trae Young is really still their only guy that's their go get a bucket, create offense for himself type of player right now. So physically making things difficult on him the entire night, really important. Obviously, attacking Trae Young defensively. Desmond Bane, this is where the Desmond Bane effect comes into play. Desmond Bane and Anthony Black particularly, just going at Trae Young, possession after possession after possession. They don't have to score, but it's the idea of hunting the fact that in the mismatch, yeah, there's going to be situations where Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Dyson Daniels and Zachary Reese, they're going to get the primary assignment. But the main thing is to find Trae Young in the action as much as humanly possible. That and get in the paint. I don't want to see a bunch of mid-range shots from Paolo Banchero in this game against Kristaps Porzingis. Kristaps Porzingis should be baby food as far as I'm concerned for Paolo Banchero. He should be baby food. And the reason why I know that is because Paolo was able to get to the free throw line 12 times against a front court that had Bam Adebayo and Khalil Ware in game 1. Bam Adebayo is a much better rim defender and much better defender in space than Kristaps Porzingis is. So that means that Paolo Banchero should be head hunting him all night long. And Wendell Carter Jr., he had a rough first 3 quarters in that game against Miami, but really picked up life in the fourth quarter. Hit a much necessary set of free throws in that game, and was a huge help as far as rebounding on the glass, especially on the offensive glass. I think he had 5 offensive rebounds. That's got to be how it gets done. This game against Atlanta is going to come down to physicality. Like, Atlanta did not deal well with the on-ball pressure and physicality that the rangy wings of Toronto presented in the first game of the season. I think that the Magic present a very similar problem for the Atlanta Hawks, and I think if they lean into that, this should be a pretty good dub. Again, Toronto won by 20, scored nearly 140, and was the highest scoring team of the night. In a night where the New York Knicks and the Cleveland Cavaliers played each other. In a night where the LA Clippers got absolutely thrashed by the Utah Jazz. In a night where Victor Wembanyama dropped 40 and 15. It was the Toronto Raptors who had the most points of the night on the second day of the NBA season. It means that the Atlanta Hawks got some real work to do defensively, and I think the Magic can expose that. But with that being said, this has been another edition of the Magic Latest Podcast. Again, remember to like, comment, and subscribe for daily Orlando Magic content. I will see you guys next time with some more Orlando Magic news, but until then, peace.